We're going to start your notes on the independence movements that were going on in Latin America. This is chapter 21, section 4, or I'm sorry, chapter 24, section 1 in your textbook. Feel free to follow along if you would like. Okay, before we talk about the Latin American independence movements, we really need to talk about the different social classes that were taking place or that were a part of their lives in Latin America. When Latin America was colonies of Spain and France, they had different social classes that made up the social order. The top social class was the peninsulares, and that really just means people from the peninsula of Spain, people from Spain. It was the top of the social ladder. It was the only people that could be in top political office and the officers of the army. The second rung in the social ladder was the Creoles. These were Spaniards that were born in the Americas, so they were people born to Spanish families in the Americas, and they couldn't hold political office, but they could rise up and become officers in the army. So under the Peninsulares, the Creoles had probably the most rights underneath the Peninsulares, who were the top. The third social class was the mestizos, and they were the people that are mixed with European and American Indian. So the natives and the Europeans that came over to settle, when they would have children, they would be mestizos. And then you have mulattoes. Mulattoes were people of European and African ancestry. And at the bottom, you have slaves. So that's important for you guys to know whenever we're talking about these different social classes and the different Latin American social classes when there are independence movements. Okay, reasons why the people in Latin America were revolting. First of all, the Creoles, they were traveling to Europe for their education. They were a higher class of people. So when they went over to Europe during the Enlightenment, they brought back these Enlightenment ideas to the Americas. The second thing that happened that would make them want to revolt was Napoleon's conquest of Spain kind of sparked a revolution. When Napoleon went into Spain and Portugal and overthrew the monarchs, people really didn't have any loyalty to the new king. They thought that once the new king was overthrown, or once the king was overthrown, Ferdinand was overthrown, the power shifted to the people. And so they felt like they had more rights based on that after Napoleon went in and conquered Spain. And the very last and probably most important reason why these revolutions were going on is because the American Revolution and the French Revolution had a huge impact and really influenced the colonies in Latin America to revolt. The colonies in America revolted against the British, so that caused the Latin American colonies to kind of want to get free from their strongholds, as well as the French Revolution being able to overthrow a bad monarch and create their own government really inspired and influenced these Latin American countries to revolt against their mother countries. Okay, the first country, and you can see down here this picture is kind of cut off, but it's just a map. The first country to revolt against their mother country was Haiti, and this is kind of an interesting revolution because it was a revolution that was an uprising of slaves. But the French colony of Saint-Domingue, which is now Haiti, it was the first Latin American island to free itself from European rule. A majority of the population of Saint-Domingue was made up of enslaved Africans. And these Africans, as we talked about earlier, they lived at the bottom of the social ladder. They worked on the plantations. They were terrorized by their masters, and their masters would brutalize the slaves. So in August of 1791, an African priest named Boukman called for a revolution in Saint-Domingue, or Haiti. The person that led this revolution, his name was Toussaint Louverture. I bet I can say that super awesome, but his name was Toussaint. We'll call him Toussaint because that is really hard to pronounce. He basically took over the territory of Saint-Domingue and he freed all of the slaves. After he does this, in 1802, the French troops come and they decide that they're going to oppose him and they're not happy about what he's done. And they agree to end slavery in Saint Domingue if the revolution against the French has stopped. Well, he agrees to do that, but the French accuse Toussaint of starting another uprising, and they send him to a jail in the French Alps, where he dies in 1803. Toussaint's general, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, he ends up continuing the fight for independence on behalf of Toussaint. And in 1804, Saint-Domingue was declared independent from France and renamed Haiti, which means mountainous land. The revolution in Haiti was the only successful Atlantic slave revolution, meaning that it was the slaves that started the revolt and not the actual upper class Creoles that were living in Saint-Domingue. It was actually the slaves. So that's important for you guys to understand that this revolution was actually the first successful slave revolution. Another change that happened in slavery around this time was in England, a man by the name of William Wilberforce, and there's his picture right there. He was an abolitionist that was able to successfully end the slave trade in England, from England. So that was a really good thing that happened as a result in slavery during this time. It's kind of a side note, something that's going to be on your test, so you might want to make sure you understand that. Okay, the second revolution that we're going to talk about was a revolution that happened in South America. And this is when Venezuela and the other countries in South America actually declare independence from Spain. Okay, the other revolutions that we're going to talk about, the other revolution that we're going to talk about are the revolutions that were taking place in South America. Out of these revolutions came two really powerful generals one named Simón Bolívar and the other named José de San Martín. We're going to talk about Bolivar first. Venezuela declares their independence from Spain in 1811, and Simón Bolivar, this is the picture of him right there, he was the general that led the revolution. When he was leading that revolution, he faced defeat and he was exiled at the beginning. However, in 1819, Bolivar led 2,000 soldiers into Colombia. They took the Spanish army by surprise and they were able to win victory. And in 1821, Venezuela officially won their independence from Spain. And I know that might be confusing that it says they declared independence in 1811, but that's just when the people declared independence. They actually didn't win their independence until 1821, but they did that with the help of Simón Bolivar. After Bolivar wins this independence for Venezuela, he meets up with José de San Martín, and they work together to free the rest of South America from the hold of the Spanish. So here's José de San Martín, and he was from Argentina, and he assists in helping Argentina declare independence in 1816. However, Spain is still posing a huge threat in Peru and Chile. So José de San Martín, he successfully leads an army to Chile, and he's able to free Chile from the Spanish. In 1821, San Martín proceeds to take his army to Lima, Peru, to free them from the Spanish, but he realizes that he needs more men and he can't do it alone. So he meets up with Simón Bolívar, and he leaves his army in the command of Bolivar, and he goes to Europe. San Martín, actually, he sails to Europe, and he eventually dies in Europe. No one really knows how the exchange between Bolivar and San Martín took place, but all they know is that Bolivar takes control of San Martín's army, and that San Martín sails to Europe. and dies, and he's kind of forgotten among all of this because Bolivar gets a lot of the credit. So Bolivar now has a unified army with San Martin and his own army, and they are able to defeat the Spanish at the Battle of Ayacucho in Peru in 1824. And this is the last major battle for independence against the Spanish. And after this defeat in 1824, all of the Spanish colonies in South America had won their freedom. So the freedoms that were taking place in South America really sparked the Spanish, or the people in Mexico, to want to lead a revolution against the Spanish in Mexico. The people that really led this revolution were the American Indians and the mestizos. The Creoles had a huge part in freeing the people in Latin America and South America, but it was the American Indians and the mestizos that really come forth and lead the revolution against the Spanish in Mexico. In 1810, Father Hidalgo, he issues what is known as the Grito de Dolores. And you may have heard this in some of your Texas history classes before, but the Grito de Dolores just means the cry for Dolores, and it's just calling the American Indians and the mestizos, people living in Mexico, to rise up in a rebellion against the Spanish. And this is a painting of Father Hidalgo issuing this cry. So Hidalgo and his followers, they march into Mexico City. What happens is the Spanish and the other Creoles that are living in Mexico are pretty alarmed by this uprising, and they basically are able to defeat Hidalgo in 1811. The rebels, they choose a new leader, and they rally around Padre Jose Maria Morelos, and Morelos leads the revolution against the Spanish for 4 years until he is put down by a Creole officer named Agustin de Iturbide. What ends up happening in 1821 is Mexico is able to declare its independence from Spain with actually the help of some of the Creoles. What happens is in Spain there's a revolution, and they get some liberal leaders that come into Spain and come into Mexico. The liberal group makes the Creoles kind of fear for their privileges and makes them fear for their power. So they actually join the rebels in support of Mexican independence. And in 1824, or in 1821, the Mexican government was able to declare independence from Spain. The independence of Brazil is kind of interesting in the fact that it's the only independence movement that isn't done with a bloody uprising or a war. In Brazil, the way it happened is as Napoleon came across the Pyrenees Mountains to conquer Portugal and Spain, the Portuguese royal family, they board ships and they come over to Brazil. And they stay in 14 years, and Brazil kind of serves as the center of the Portuguese Empire. What ends up happening is after Napoleon's defeat, after Napoleon leaves Portugal, the Portuguese monarchy wants to restore Brazil as a colony as it originally was. Well, Brazil kind of had grown and had really created their own culture in this time that they were living as the center of the Portuguese Empire, and they did not want to go back to becoming a colony again. So the people of Brazil in 1822 signed a petition asking Dom Pedro, who was the son of Prince John of Portugal, to rule Brazil. In 1822, Dom Pedro, he declares Brazil to be independent, and Brazil had won their independence in a bloodless revolution.